Hello everyone and welcome to Literary Spaces. In this video, we will discuss the second unit of the GE paper, Basics of Social Psychology. In the past video, we covered the first unit. This one is called Person Perception and Social Cognition. In this unit, we will have to cover social schemas, heuristics, attribution, its types and theories. So let's get started with what is person perception and social cognition. Person perception or social cognition refers to how we form impressions about other people. It refers to all of the mental processes that goes inside our head in social situation. It helps us make sense of this world. There are four main components of person perception and social cognition. These are observation. Observation is the raw data of social perception. We observe people and the society around us to find evidence to make perception. These can be their physical appearance, behavior, context of the situation, and etc. For example, we see a student coming late to class. We observe that that student is coming late. Secondly, there is attribution. After making our observation, we attribute those observations to different traits of this person. For example, we saw the student coming late to class. We attribute this to either the student having very bad time management or that they were stuck in an unavoidable situation. The third step is integration. After making observation and attributions, we will integrate all the available information into a unified impression. For example, if we see the student coming late to class again, judging from all of the information and all of the experiences we had with that student, we will make the impression that the student has very bad time management. The last step is confirmation. Lastly, we tend to confirm our impression. We observe the person's behavior over time to see if the impression that we made was correct or not. For example, the student comes late to class again and we have confirmed our impression of their tardiness. Now, this was just an introduction to the unit. Now we will move on to the main topics that we have to study. The first is social schemas. Schemas are mental frameworks or knowledge structure that hold information about a concept, about its attributes and its connection to other concepts. For example, think about the word dancing. Immediately your head will be filled with various other images and words like movement, rhythm, music, dancing shoes. Along with it, there is the association with romance, art, and perhaps feelings like joy or embarrassment. This is the schema for dancing. Now there are different types of schema. First, there is person schema. These are knowledge structure about specific individual. For example, the schema of your best friend might include that she is kind, intelligent, introverted, likes to read, etc. Next, we have self schema. These are focused on knowledge about yourself. This can include both what you know about your current self as well as ideas about your idealized or future self. Lastly, we have the event schemas that are also known as scripts. These are focused on patterns of behavior that should be followed for certain events in a social situation. This acts like a script informing you what you should do, how you should act, and what you should say in a particular situation. For example, the schema of going to a cafe will include reading the menu, ordering, eating and drinking, paying the bill, and etc. Now let's discuss why do we need schema. Schemas simplify complex information and guides our behavior. For example, if someone invites you to go dancing, your schema will immediately tell you to prepare for music, wear appropriate shoes, and perhaps expect a romantic context. They help to set expectations for our daily life and make routine events easier to process without much thought. However, there are also drawbacks of schema. Sometimes an existing schema can hinder the learning of new information. It can also create prejudice and prevent us from seeing the world as it is. Schemas can also lead to stereotypes. For example, the gender schemas that we have in our society. We all have an image of what is seen as feminine and masculine, and this leads to gender discrimination and oppression. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts. It reduces the cognitive effort and time required for decision making in our daily life. We are using heuristic all the time to make fast and practical judgments. But sometimes heuristics do lead to mistakes. They may oversimplify complex decisions, ignoring all the relevant details or probabilities. Let's see the different types of heuristics. First, there is representative heuristic. Representative heuristic is the tendency to judge someone based on a prototype or stereotype you have in your head. Now, it is a very complex definition, so let's understand this through an example. Think about someone who wears glasses, has a love for books, and spends most of the time in the library studying about different topics that they're interested in. Now, tell me, what do you think is the profession of this person? It is very common for us to think that this person might be a librarian or a professor, something like that. But what if this person is a truck driver? Here we have immediately made a judgment based on the stereotype or the representative we have in our head. Things like glasses, books, and libraries are a stereotype for someone like librarians and professor. And we make this kind of mistakes in our daily life all the time. Sometimes this helps us and sometimes it doesn't. Next we have availability heuristic. This is the tendency of judging something by the ease with which relevant instances come up to your mind. To understand this with an example, let's talk about breakfast. For some, it brings up the idea of coffee and eggs. And for some other people, it might bring up the idea of fruits or salad, because that is what you're most used to having in your daily life. It is highly available in your head, and that's why you make judgments based on that. Next, we have simulation heuristic. This is judging something based on how easily you can imagine it happening. For example, if you have to take the bus today, you know what it is like. You have to go and wait at the bus stop, you have to get on the bus, you have to buy your ticket, then choose a seat and then get off the bus in your right stop. You know about taking the bus because you have done it frequently and you can imagine it in your head. But for someone who has never climbed the bus, they can't properly imagine it. And for them, making a judgment about taking the bus is very hard. Lastly, we have the concept of anchoring or adjustment heuristic. This is the tendency to rely heavily on an initial piece of information, that is the anchor, when making a decision. For example, you try to talk to one of your classmates and she rudely ignores you and leaves. You think that she is mean and not friendly at all. So you try to ignore her. But what if she had an emergency and needed to leave as fast as she could? The next time she approaches you and tries to talk to you, it is more likely that you will rely on that first piece of information, that anchor, and try to ignore her. And those were all of the major heuristics. Now let's see the concept of attribution. You might remember attribution from the beginning of this video when we were studying social perception. This was the second step. But your syllabus has highly focused on this topic, so we need to discuss this more. The concept of attribution explains how we infer the causes of events and behaviors. It's basically to find causes of everything that is going around you in your society. To understand this concept better, we need to look at some of the major attribution theories in social psychology. First is the attribution theory. This is the original attribution theory proposed by Fritz Heider. He explained how people attribute and he distinguished attribution into two different categories. That is internal and external. Internal attribution is done to individuals' characteristic or personality, whereas external attribution is done to the surrounding situation or environment. For example, if a student comes late to class, we can make two types of attribution. In the first one, we can blame them for having very bad time management. This is making internal attribution to that person's personality. In the second attribution, we can think about how that student can be stuck in an unavoidable situation and that's why he was late to class. Here, we are making an external attribution to the situation or the environment of that student. The second theory is correspondence inference. This was developed by Edward Jones and Keith Davis. This theorized that people correspond others' behavior to their personality trait. Basically, humans see other people's behavior and then they link it to their personality. This might look as something very common, but Jones and Davis highlights three factors for making this correspondence. First is the person's degree of choice. Does the person have a choice in their action? For example, we go to a restaurant and see that a lady standing at the door greets us with a big smile saying, "Welcome to the restaurant, we hope you have a great time." Does this mean she just always likes people and is always so nice and friendly? Then we realize that they are hired by the restaurant to do that. And now we can't make an inference anymore. We can't say that her actions are directly linked to her personality. The next factor that they talk about is the expectedness of the behavior. Is this behavior expected and normal in our society? For example, we are walking on a street and we suddenly see this man starts to kick a dog. This is not an expected behavior in our society, and that tells us that that man is probably mad. The last factor that they talk about is the intended effect or consequences. What is the intention of this person behind their actions? For example, you see a man getting married to someone who is very rich and has a very great personality. From this information, you can't make much about that person's personality. But if you get to know the reason behind this marriage, then we can make a direct inference. This man can be marrying the other person because he just likes their personality, or he can marry them for the money. And that is how intentions helps us make inference between the behavior and the personality traits. Our next theory is the covariation theory. This was developed by Harold Kelly, and it refers to how humans make causal inferences to explain why someone behaved in a certain way. We always want to know why other people act the way they do. Why is your friend not replying to your text, or why didn't you get the promotion you were hoping for? Kelly suggests that we answer these types of questions by examining three main factors. The first is consensus. Do other people react the same way in this situation? The second is consistency. Does the person in this situation react the same way every time the situation occurs? The last one is distinctiveness. Does the person react the same way in other situations as well? Now these factors can seem very complicated, so let's understand through an example. Imagine that you're working in an office and one of your clients in the meeting got very angry. You need to know why, and so you start to examine these factors. First, we see consensus. Was anyone else present in this meeting acting the same way? Did this client get angry again when you brought up the same topic? And lastly, we have distinctiveness. Does this client always act this angry in every situation? Now, if we find that other people in the meeting also got angry, the client doesn't act this way usually, and the client got angry again when you brought up the topic. This gives an impression that something is wrong in the way you acted in the meeting or the way your topic was presented. But if we find that no other people in the meeting got angry, this client got angry again, and he behaves angrily all the time, this will tell us that that person just has an angry personality. And those were some of the major attributional theories present in social psychology. Now we will see some common attributional errors that we make on a daily basis. First is the concept of fundamental attribution errors or correspondence bias. This theory says that people are more likely to attribute internally without considering all the situational causes that are present and highly influential. Let's go back to that example of the student coming late to class. People are always going to attribute it as the student having bad time management for not being sincere enough in their studies. And we frequently forget about all of the situational causes that might have caused this. Next is the actor-observer bias. This is the tendency of actors to attribute their behaviors to external causes and of observers to attribute others' behavior to internal causes. Let's take an example. If we see someone tripping on a sidewalk, we will think that that person is very clumsy. But if we had slipped in the sidewalk, we would likely think that the sidewalk was uneven or slippery. This is the actor-observer bias. In the first situation where the other person tripped, we were the observer. So we immediately attributed their tripping to their internal behavior, to them being clumsy. The next situation, we became the actor when we tripped, and we attributed this to our external situation. This is a very common mistake that we make in our daily life. Lastly, we have the self-serving bias. It is the tendency of people to attribute positive outcomes to internal causes and negative ones to external factors. This is another very common mistake. Take an example that you failed a test. You are most likely to attribute it to external factors like the difficulty of the paper, the teacher's harsh grading standards, and even your luck. But if you had passed that exam and got complimented from your teachers, you will attribute it to internal causes like your ability, your hard work, and the effort that you put on it. And those were some of the common attribution errors that we make in daily life. And with that, we have discussed all of the topics present in this unit. Stay tuned for upcoming videos where I'll discuss the other units, and thanks for watching.